Catherine has done the majority of the organizing in this community for the past year. Catherine has shouldered, and it's not only Catherine, women of color have done the majority of the organizing in this community for the past year. Catherine has been demonized. She's been called a thug. She's been called a terrorist. She's been called ghetto trash. She's been called all kinds of stuff that she doesn't deserve to be called.
Been called a criminal yoga teacher.
What was that?
A criminal yoga teacher.
Yeah. So, listen to Catherine. Catherine made this happen today. And while she says that I was her partner on this project, I feel like a large part of my role has been just moral support. I have not really been able to be as committed as I would like to be. But when Catherine has a problem, when she calls me crying because this happened and this happened and this happened, and people are saying this about her and she's having this kind of trouble in her life, that's what we can do to support women of color. We can listen to them. And I just want people to know that it's really important to center their voices before I give my planned comments. My comments are going to be talking about the plight of the Irish, which is a common theme that I see happening in this country. People say things like, "Oh, well, the Irish were slaves too." My comments are to address that. Every now and then, I notice the ways some people attempt to minimize the effects of the genocide of indigenous people as well as slavery by drawing a direct comparison to the plight of the Irish and claiming that having Irish heritage means the effects of white supremacy are no longer relevant. White supremacy is a dividing force that prevents us all from pooling our resources to focus on our common enemies, the rich and powerful, the men who were given the right to vote by the same founding fathers who owned and traded slaves like cattle, rich men who owned land and businesses, the same people who wield power over the rest of us today. Instead of multiplying power among the many, they continue to divide power among the few, using legislation such as Citizens United and gerrymandering tactics to ensure we cannot challenge their power using the very few means that they still allow us. As slaves fought to gain their freedom, the modern-day police force was created as a response to slave revolts and escape attempts, and many Irish people chose to forget their history and accept jobs as the new enforcers of white supremacy. When the strikes of the early 1900s were broken and the workers beaten, police officers were there. When the slaves were hunted down as lost property, police officers were there to reclaim them. When ICE vans round up immigrants today, police officers are there. When Shalik Moss was murdered, he was murdered by police officers. For this reason, it should be no question that we should all remember who we are and where we came from. Whether you're Irish, Scottish, English, French, it doesn't matter. Irish people were once treated terribly in this country. The origins of the majority of the Irish in this country were within the mines, within the factories, working in the fields, as teachers, as nurses, and as soldiers holding rifles and storming a beach in France to defeat fascists. None of us can compromise our values as human beings for more scraps from their tables. We must all stand together. There's an old saying that was told to me by a white homeless veteran from Missouri who had come out to some of our earlier Harrisburg Rising meetings. Black is beautiful, tan is grand, and white is the color of the big boss man. This quote speaks to me because it sends the message that we should all have solidarity against any system that provides preferential treatment for white people. We have a choice we can make. Accept things as they are, or work towards a better world for all people. We can double down in ignorance and in denial, or we can acknowledge our mistakes, which I have made many of. I'm not a flawless human being. We can work to repair the trust that has been broken. We don't get to choose the color of our skin. White people don't get to choose that 90% of the actors and actresses we see on TV and in movies look like us. We don't get to choose that police officers are less likely to pull us over and more likely to treat us with respect when they do. We don't get to choose that certain names on job applications will be given preferential treatment over names that have origins in other cultures. We don't get to choose any of that. But we do get a choice in whether we accept the way things are or fight for the lives we all deserve the right to share. Malcolm X was once questioned whether the Black Panthers would allow white members to join. Malcolm X responded with the words, "If John Brown were still alive today, we might accept him." Captain John Brown was a man of English heritage from a nation which also has a history of colonialism and imperialism that targeted the Irish. However, Brown chose to be a moral man. He was a man of God, a man of action, an abolitionist, a personal friend to and co-conspirator alongside Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass. Perhaps his most well-known quote was as follows: "These men are all talk. What is needed is action." John Brown did not believe in obtaining permits for his protests. He was a militant anti-racist, a farmer from Kansas on a mission to end the Civil War before it began. His plan was to lead a group of 18 men, 13 who were white and 5 who were freed black men, to raid a federal armory in Harper's Ferry, located in Virginia at the time. Now the borders have been redrawn and it's West Virginia. Although the daring raid in 1859 was initially successful, Brown had been betrayed by one of his own men after insisting on higher pay for his role in training the other men. He chose instead to alert authorities of the plan, and eventually they failed. Having physically fought their way into the armory and in possession of its rifles and ammunition, a key bridge ended up being taken during the fighting by pro-slavery sympathetic forces, and Brown's plans for retreat and evacuation were dashed in that moment. John Brown was captured, tried, found guilty of treason against the Commonwealth of Virginia, and sentenced to death by hanging. 2 of his own sons gave their lives in the fighting. He was hanged on December 2nd, 158 years ago today. Not much has changed since then. There are still white people who act as slave masters in this country. They work in prisons, on Wall Street,
Sure enough.
in Congress, in the White House, and as the owners of NFL teams.
Yup.
There are still those of us who resist their evil misdeeds. There are still those of us who would betray each other over disagreements of tactics. There are still those of us who know our history as people who stand together. There are still those of us left alive to continue fighting. Those of us who have not yet been confined to the walls of a prison. There are real consequences to doing the work that we do, but we cannot be afraid as long as we stand together in numbers. There will always be John Browns, Fred Hamptons, and Colin Kaepernicks in this world. There will always be Harriet Tubmans, Bree Newsoms, and Assata Shakurs as well.
That's right.
Although none of us can change what has already happened, we have the ability to learn from our mistakes. We have the ability to look to the historical lessons of the past in order to preserve the future. We have the ability to say, "I'm sorry," and we have the ability to forgive. We stand here today at a pivotal moment in history where we each get to make a choice about who we want to be going forward after today's event. We can commit ourselves to remaining active agents of struggle against white supremacy, which ultimately hurts us all. I encourage everyone here in this crowd tonight to be unafraid and to stand together and to say that human beings are not property and will never again be property. Whether they work in a tobacco field or on a football field, we will defy white supremacy within our communities wherever it exists. I'm not suggesting that anyone here tonight do as John Brown did, but I am asking that you stand firm and clear in your convictions. When the Klan and Nazis held a rally in Harrisburg last year, hundreds came out and stood against their hatred in defiance. A white supremacist group called Identity Europa is still attempting to gain a foothold in Lancaster City. They're led by a man named Evan McLaren, by the way.
Yep.
Look him up. Put his name out there. Put him on blast. Fuck him up.
Yeah.
There's another by the name of the Keystone State Skinheads. They're led by a man named Bob Goss. Look him up. He's a real bad dude. Put his name out there. Put him on blast. Fuck him up.
That's right. Woo!
An openly Nazi organization who still maintain a presence in Harrisburg. These groups will not be successful, and we will not be swayed from our mission. We will kick these hateful bigots out of our communities. We will acknowledge our mistakes. We will say we are sorry when we do wrong, and we will mean it. We will love each other, fight for each other, and protect each other. Because that is our duty as neighbors, as friends, as romantic lovers, as parents, as teachers, as workers, and as human beings. Thank you all for having me tonight. I'd like to introduce our next performers, Josh Ari. Josh, come on up. Josh?
Here he comes.
Here's Josh, everyone.
Marcus, what's the point?
Give Josh a big round of applause. He's a Harrisburg local. Please stick around. We're almost wrapped up. Please stick around. Thank you all.
Hi, nice to meet you.
What's up, everybody? That was
Snotty kid over.
He said, listen, lady,
I'm trying to
I heard about you.
What's up, everybody?
What's up, Josh?
That was better. That was better. But thank y'all all for coming out here today. I know it's cold, but white supremacy is cold. Ain't it
That's
cold?
right.
It's some weird shit. These people think that they're superior to other people in every single way. Like they're not actually a human being, right? So these people think even physiologically, there's like people that study the human, what do they call it? The bones and shit. Anthropologists.